habit I'm kicking. Conscious roll call, is it casting auditions? If you notice, I ain't brushing the past isn't finished.
What is the music stuff?
For action central banks that have increased the slack of their monetary policy and continue to print money at a very sustained rate. This money needs to go somewhere, and so it also goes to alternatives such as venture capital investment. And it's not a surprise to see an increased activism of these funds in investing in new ventures. It's not a demand effect. There is more money. Venture capital need to put it somewhere, and so they invest more.
And the VCs $20 billion this year, primarily in software, e-commerce, digital health, and financial technology. So why are venture capitalists focusing in these areas, and what are the emerging trends?
Cannabis
yes, these are definitely
the UK or some shit. You were talking about the UK when I left.
The bulk of big bet, and they are, I would say, with the exception of digital health, they are the same major themes that have been dominant in the years in venture capital investment. So there is no big change. One change is digital health. Digital health is there because, of course, the pandemic has shown some global unpreparedness in terms of health policies, health policies, but also in terms of in terms of medicines and in terms of infrastructure, health infrastructure. And I think that the digitalization of industry had spared a little bit the health sector and is now full on the health sector because of this. I would say that one big sector that seems to be lacking in your list. I know that there is some activism in venture capital transportation. I think that this is also linked to new policies and new strategies of companies in terms of environmental sustainability. There is a massive investment in transportation, especially in clean transformation, sustainable transportation.
That's my old not try any harder.
And this is also an important stream of investment, representing an important stream of investment.
And figures show that the global VCs invested $140 billion into US-based startups. So why are US-based companies more attractive? And what other countries and regions are they interested in?
I think it's not a question that US-based firms are more attractive. It's a question of the maturity of venture capital investment that is, of course, much larger. And so this of course leads to more investment in venture capital firms in the States. But China has been catching up very fast.
Yeah, but they don't have money. It's the drug cartels in other countries that set up venture capital firms, places like Hong Kong,
in China, and also Europe is, I would say, with a delay, catching up with this venture capital investment phase. We are seeing in many countries in Europe new hubs coming up. In Berlin, for example, the city where I live, is a new prey for venture capital investment, and so is the Netherlands, and so is France, and of course the UK. So Europe is a little bit with some delay with respect to the US and China. But it's trying to catch up as well.
And US-based VCs raised $70 billion in the first half, and Asian and European venture capital funds raised 16 billion and 8.2 billion respectively. So how do you explain Asia's role in today's venture capital funding? Why is it becoming stronger?
Well, it is becoming stronger also because of the same reason why U.S. and European venture capital investments become stronger. So there is a lot of liquidity to be invested in those ventures. But also, you have a change in terms of where the innovation is more active, is more dynamic. And for a long time, I would say, in kind of the first phase of this last
So the Chinese and the Germans really are trying to take over all the American companies. That's what we've learned in the first 5 minutes of this recording. Thank you. Wow, that's kind of fucked up. He's talking about it. The radio's not working.
In the year 2000, and
honest,
it's even more important now because venture capital has covered an increasing share of what is called alternative investment.
It's all that drug money.
The attention towards and the money that is redirected towards smaller companies is what you call
venture capital.
Right now, we do not have a final bill from the vet. They did
get one.
Estimate. Oh yes, I know, and they will give us an estimate.
You got a dog? It better be a dog, I swear, or a cat or something. What weird animal you got? If you save a cow or a pig, I'm gonna be very upset.
And you can, I guess, viewers online can see that she has numerous staples on her low body, and
are now smaller startup companies to a much larger
extent. All
than
reaches your emotions, and you can make a difference because you can send her $5.
And almost 3/4 of the total have been focused on the late stage startups. So why is that? Does it mean the early stage startups are quite risky?
Very different for a venture capital to invest in an idea. So it's a very early stage, almost an what is called incubation. And to focus on late-stage startups. You normally focus on late-stage startups when your appetite for risk is smaller. Of course, you risk less as an investment company to invest in a company that is already developed, that has already a market, that is already some products that are sold, because you don't have to guess too much the success, the future success of the company. And so it depends on the risk aversion. On the general risk aversion, I think, of the investment.
That's Lucas Silipo, economist and business innovation strategist at supply chain company Geodis.
Venture capital
the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases worldwide has surpassed 190 million, with more than 4 million deaths, according to the latest data from Johns Hopkins University. The Chinese mainland recorded 50 new confirmed cases, 12 local transmissions, and 38 from overseas. That's all the time for this edition of World Today. A quick recap of today's headlines. The Chinese senior health official said he was shocked by the World Health Organization.
Eating evolved. Visit makegoodfood.ca. Certain conditions apply. Details on makegoodfood.ca.
The Kings of Cake return to Food Network. In the blue corner, Duck, the ace of...
Oh, wait, what part of the hour are we in?
The Albanese American Dance Theater, rehearsing a tribute for the 60th anniversary.
Ich bin ein gottverdammter Alien. Ich fahr den Stern nicht umsonst auf dem Mercedes-Benz. Von Kopf bis Fuß Alexander Wang. So erzähl ich Alexander Wang. Exzellent Sex im Band, statt mit Stacks auf Stacks. Captain Glanz, so herzlich wie S1. Asyl auf der Erde, ich bin Special Guest. Space Jam Rap, Watch Islands Flag. Brauch nicht viel, brauch nur was, das echt ist. Fühlt sich an, als ob ich hier fremd bin. Man hat sich ist wie ein scheiß Gefängnis. Und ich tries in the past. Magic, it's magic. Something stands up off my past. You know it's magic. Magic, striking me down. It's something magic. It's magic. It's something stands up off my past. You know it's magic. It's magic, striking me down. Was geht ab? Nimm mal den Cup. Und dann was ist kein Sachen. Mach ich wap, wie ein Cointeich. Young God, ich mach meine Leute reiß. Ich hab Eis wie Gelato, Diamantenhals, Sadomaso. Manchmal fühle ich mich alleine wie ein Astro. Ich beamiere Pussy bis zum Mars, so. Zuckerguss auf ihrem Cake. Ich mach Money, let it rain. Das ist die Magic, Baby. Und ich kann gar nicht verlieren, hat den Champagne, Baby. Magic, Magic. Ich trag den Steinstaub aus meinen Blasen. Genau, ich mag das Geist in den Herzen. Ich bin so Magic, steig in den Blasen. Ich hab die Magic. Ich trag den Steinstaub aus meinen Blasen. Genau, ich mag das Geist in den Herzen. Ich bin so Magic, steig in den Blasen.
Gotta be there to The next hour is gonna suck or be awesome.
Slumming with the sword, I'm a rough motherfucker. They don't wanna catch me at my best, but I'm a best. And that's exactly why I gotta put them in the dirt. You should see us go to work. Watch me hit them where it hurts. Watch me fucking hit them first. Watch me put them in a hearse. Drinking blood and
actually radioactive.
Catch a charge with every verse. This who cheated kinda cursed. FTP across my shirt. Yeah, fuck the population. Fuck your life and occupation. I'ma watch you run away. It look like immigration. Same grubby sweater since high school. Drugs out the vial, I'm vile, more screens and vials. Survival of the fittest, I'm a walking pandemic. Try to take on me and do the jogging man with it. What's a champion scene without some sadness up in it? I know the world is ours, I'm just having a minute. Another dead man walking with a casket incentive. It's either a bucket or a habit I'm kicking. Conscience roll call or is it casting auditions? If you notice I ain't present, it's cause the past isn't finished.
And opened fire on a street packed with people. That night, 10-year-old Juliana Kozix and 18-year-old Reese Fallon were killed and 13 others were injured. Among those on hand for the memorial was Ali Demirkin, who was struck by a bullet during the mass shooting. He says the memories of that July night in 2018 are still fresh.
All the memories keep coming back. It's like happened 3 minutes ago and everything is still alive. I'm sure all other survivors, other families, that still have the same effect as I have. And I don't think it's going to go away. But, you know, when the time passes, we are healing up a little bit. And we are getting a little better.
Well, Mayor John Tory was also in attendance tonight, and while offering continued support to the victims and their families, he adds the city is determined to keep Toronto safe and free from violence. Ontario science advisors are recommending the use of COVID-19 vaccination certificates, even though Premier Doug Ford has rejected any proof of vaccination system. As Global's Brittany Rosen explains, the recommendation comes from a 21-page brief released by the group yesterday.
According to the brief, vaccine certificates could be useful in the short term, and it could also play a role in the long term as a secure electronic or paper record of immunization. The group adds the documents could be useful should the province face another wave of COVID-19.
We still have a lot of people who are not vaccinated, and this will hold us back. When you think about the timelines there, we better get ready for, end of August, beginning of September, not to introduce it, but to have it in our back pocket if things start to look dim again.
Well, in the meantime, the debate over mandatory COVID-19 vaccines for healthcare workers has been growing in Ontario as more countries move forward with a controversial approach in order to safeguard healthcare settings and fight the spread of more contagious variants. The Ontario Medical Association and the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario have called for mandatory vaccines for healthcare workers. Premier Doug Ford said last week that healthcare workers have a constitutional right to opt out of vaccination despite the province mandating immunization policies for long-term home care staff. While speaking with Global News Radio, clinical pharmacologist Sabina Vora-Miller says the government should try every route possible before mandating it.
I do think that vaccines should be mandatory for healthcare workers. In fact, not just for the fact that they are looking after vulnerable people in our community, but also for their own safety, the safety of the healthcare workers themselves and the safety of their family. We should be trying as much as we can to try and get vaccine uptake to as high as
Who's the one they wanted me to have?
Critics
I
say
won't live
ensuring
long
as many
enough to
healthcare
get
workers are
the
vaccinated as
COVID or
possible
whatever.
will maintain stability in the healthcare system and mitigate future outbreaks. Now, this is a message to Canadians who previously had COVID-19. The National Advisory Committee on Immunization says it's still important to get 2 vaccine doses.
NACI says it continues to recommend a complete series of the COVID-19 vaccine to individuals who previously had a confirmed SARS-CoV-2 infection. That, despite these individuals appearing to be at lower risk for reinfection and often showing no symptoms if they do become infected again.
It's like a vaccinated
NACI
person.
says this updated advice comes after reviewing scientific evidence from real-world studies combined with the committee's expert opinion. It adds individuals should wait to receive a vaccine until they no longer have COVID-19 symptoms and are no longer infectious to others. Brianna Carnegie, Global News.
A summit on Islamophobia has told government action is needed to end discrimination and attacks against Muslims. While he conceded his government must take action, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told the virtual gathering that everyone has a role to play to fight Islamophobia.
Governments and institutions and organizations, workplaces and individual Canadians all have essential roles to play, to be friends, to be allies, but also to be part of the solution.
Well, the summit was organized following a series of violent, targeted attacks that killed or injured Muslim Canadians and left communities around the country in shock. And Green Party leader Annamie Paul is seeking to frame a legal challenge from her own party as they work on a small group of outgoing executives that amounts to a one-sided attack. As she opened her campaign office in downtown Toronto today, Paul said the court action was not sanctioned by the Greens' main governing body.
This was not an action sanctioned by our federal council. It is not an action that came before our federal council. And so I am asking people to just have patience as we transition.
Yesterday, the party submitted court filings that aim to overturn arbitration orders to cancel a non-confidence vote against Paul by the council. Now, the continued turmoil inside the Green Party comes as it and other federal parties prepare for what many expect will be a federal election call as early as next month. Listen to us in HD, tune to 95.3 FM and select Channel 2. In sports, the NHL has left room in its schedule for an Olympic break this coming season, but adds that no final decision has been made on whether athletes will play in the Beijing 2022 games. The NHL says the 2021-22 campaign will start October 12th with the Tampa Bay Lightning hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins, while the first Canadian matchup will see the Montreal Canadiens face the Maple Leafs in Toronto on October 13th. The league says it has agreed to pause play between February 7th and 22nd for the Olympics, but notes talks are ongoing between the NHL Players Association and the International Ice Hockey Federation. Looking at your forecast from the Global News Weather Center, partly cloudy tonight alongside an overnight low of 15. I'm Darren Boland, and this is Global News.
This is On Point with Alex Pearson on Global News Radio.
These are the actions of a small group of outgoing counselors. This was not an action sanctioned by our federal council. It is not an action that came before our federal council. And so I am asking people to just have patience as we transition. And we are in a big transition. Most of our counselors will have their terms expiring next month. I'm very excited to work with our next group of counselors. And I am not going to be distracted any further from really the work that has to be done. That is really what we're here to do.
Well, Annamie Paul may not see this as a distraction, but her party is a complete gong show. And I don't know what's going on, but it seems intent on destroying itself at a time when this party actually had a chance to capitalize on voters who feel betrayed by Justin Trudeau's climate policies. And yet here we are, weeks away for an election. And the party grassroots members may have chosen Ms. Paul as the one person they wanted to lead the party, but it is very clear that the executives behind the scene are determined in whatever way they can to destroy her and I guess leave the party unelectable. Stephen Carter, president of Decide Campaigns, also one of the strategists on the Strategist podcast, joins us now. Good to have you, Stephen.
Thanks very much for having me today, Alex.
Your expertise in part is political communication, and I was listening to Annamie Paul speak today, and, you know, I'm not so sure her message is getting through this very obvious dumpster fire burning all around her, but she is trying.
Yeah, she's out there trying real hard, but everybody in the Green Party is fighting her. The Green Party is trying to drag her down at a time when she's trying to lift herself up. even going so far as to remove the staff that are supposed to be helping her get elected in Toronto Centre in the, as you mentioned, forthcoming election. This is all hands on deck to destroy the Green Party by the Green Party itself.
Like, I have no skin in this game because I'm not a Green voter, but I look at this from the outside in. I think the treatment of this woman is disgraceful. I think I mean, look, the grassroots members chose her. That's what the party was built on, you know? And so I think the treatment that she's getting from the internal politics is just
roots are not
disgraceful.
green, technically.
You know, but she is clearly intent on running in one of the hardest ridings to win. You know, it's downtown Toronto, as you well know, is very red, no matter who runs. And she claims that there's no infighting and that this is just a big transition, but there is infighting, and I'm not sure that she has the time now to get the momentum under her feet that she's going to need.
So at a time when Canada needs the Green Party probably more than it ever has. I mean, I'm out in Western Canada where we're undergoing a huge climate emergency, and we can see it now. We can see it, we can feel it, we can breathe it. And the Green Party, the people who've been talking about it for the longest, are essentially silent because they are doing infighting and they're not respecting the will of their own members because, of course, a group of men, mostly men, know best and want to save the party from the woman elected by the members. And this is a story that has happened before. I worked with Alison Redford, watching her get undermined from day one by the men who ran the party. And it's hard to be in politics. It's hard enough to be in politics anyway without being undermined by your own team.
I mean, look, Paul Martin fought with Jean Chrétien. There's been infighting in parties, but one thing they did was, I guess, maybe back in the day it wasn't seen as that, but even that didn't get this ugly. I don't think we've ever seen anything quite this ugly in politics displayed so publicly.
Well, I mean, I've seen people, when I've said this is the worst thing that I've ever seen to a Canadian political leader, some people have tried to drudge up examples of when it was just this bad. It's never been this bad. If it's been bad, it's been one elected member trying to take on another elected member. Keep in mind that in our system, someone who's elected by the membership, someone who's elected by the general public should have more standing than the people sitting in the back rooms with their big cigars trying to decide which direction a party should go. The back roomers should not have this type of power and should not have this strong a voice.
And unfortunately, in politics today, that is just a reality. And I think, you know, that is why we have so much cynicism when it comes to politics. It's because of this centralized power within that is not really serving the people, but serving the internal executive. But where's Elizabeth May? I mean, she has literally, utterly been silent. I know that she had knee surgery, but this is a woman who's never been afraid to speak. She doesn't ever stop talking. And yet, where is she?
Well, this is the great sin, I think, of that she's faced with. She should be out there leading the change to this new leader, and instead she puts forward tepid support for the party, tepid support for the leader when forced months after the problem began. And again, keeping in mind the problem begins with something as like the Palestine-Israel issue, which is not even that core to the overall green message structure. This is a fight about nothing that people have drawn trenches on, and it's as intracted now as the First World War, with both sides just lobbing grenades at the other. And Anime Paul is now trying to pretend as though it doesn't exist, trying to be the United States in this situation. Everybody's in it. It's a disaster, and it's going to cost the Green Party those few seats that it had.
Is that how you see it? That they're going to lose the 2 seats? Because I mean, in order to run a campaign, you got to look like you at least have you have to have your collective stuff together. I mean, at least on appearances, it might be disarray in the background, chaotic, but you never let that show. Never let them see you sweat. I just don't know, and I've certainly heard from a lot of young people who looked at her and thought, okay, well, here's an opportunity, here's a new face, here's a new voice, a new idea. I don't like Justin Trudeau, he hasn't delivered. They don't look at Jagmeet Singh, but they were looking at her, and I just don't see her being able to get the organization in check before Justin Trudeau calls this election, because obviously this works to his advantage, and he's in, you know, if you believe the polls, this majority status. So as far as he's concerned, he wants this election tomorrow, if he could call it.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I think that young people and women across the country and people who are concerned about the environment are looking for a different style of leadership. And Anime Paul represents that. She is the physical embodiment of change. And instead of having that opportunity to redefine what leadership in Calgary in Canada could look like, she's found herself kind of trapped by her executive, pushed outside, and at a time when Justin Trudeau couldn't be more happy to have a soft green votes start to float back to the Liberal Party of Canada. She can't organize. She can't get. She has made a bad choice of going in Toronto.
That's a reflex when you're thinking about the cold weather.
That is her choice to make. And I think that elected should be given the opportunity to make choices that they think are right, and then suffer the consequence
afterwards. All you can think about when it's cold
what you're seeing now is someone suffering the consequence without being able to actually commit the mistake.
Well, she should have run against Jenica Atwin. I think that would have just been the story of the election. But that opportunity is not one she's taking. And I live beside the riding she's running in, and I just don't think even on her third try, and even though she's high profile right now in the media, I just don't think it's going to translate into a green vote. It's just the reality of this particular area of Toronto. But here we are. Do you get the sense, because of all of this infighting, that the Green Party is dead moving forward, or where do you see this going?
I think that the Green Party is in a really difficult position, because when the Green Party forms, of course, it is taking up arms on an issue that people don't realize how important it's going to be 20 years in the future. And now the NDP's got a very strong green platform. The Liberals have a strong green platform. The Québécois have a strong green platform. The only party not with a strong green platform is the Conservatives, and even they're making notions of it. I mean, it's not real, but it's at least they're pretending. The Green Party, have they lost their age on that? Have they lost why they should exist? And I fear that they could have been carving out the "I told you so" positioning. We were the first ones there, and at this particular moment, they're just giving it all away, and they're giving it back to the other parties. They're giving their positioning back to the Liberals and to the NDP. I mean, Jagmeet Singh is probably the one who's got the most to gain from this complete annihilation of the Green Party by their own hand at a time when they really should be taking something vaguely resembling a victory lap.
Yeah, and ultimately that plays well for Aaron O'Toole, but nonetheless, I mean, look, the only thing going for Anna May Paul, I think right now, and it's sad to say, is a fourth wave, because if Trudeau calls this a fourth wave, he'll pay the price politically. But the longer she can keep this election from being called, obviously the better off she is in getting her feet under her. But none